welcome members who are in the meeting room today, and we have quite a few of them. Firstly, we have John Stewart here, Pádraig Delargy, Trevor Lunn, Emma Sheeran and myself. And joining us via video conferencing is Alex Easton. Members, you're welcome to use your mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and all devices are muted, and obviously you can connect with the Assembly Wi-Fi. Item number 1 is apologies, and we have received apologies from Diane Dodds. We have also received apologies from Christopher Stafford. He has indicated that he will be in the chamber this afternoon moving several amendments, and he wanted to let the public know that.
Can I give apologies from Pat Sheehan? He's in the chamber as well.
Pat Sheehan is also in the Assembly today at the plenary. Okay. Item number 2 is Chairman's business. And I have a number of items that I want to bring under the heading of Chairman's business. And the first one I wish to raise is to make some comment really on the terrible murder of Aisling Murphy. And of course we need to remember all the other victims of violence against women and girls. We must reflect on the fact that the murder rate against women here that is connected to domestic violence is the joint worst in the whole of Western Europe. I believe that this is a crisis for women here in Northern Ireland. We know, of course, that the Executive Office is preparing a strategy addressing violence against women and girls, and I think that we must reiterate to officials that this has to be a political priority. Although we need to get the policy right, we must also make fast progress. Perhaps some action can be taken along the way rather than waiting for the completion of the strategy before we initiate any new actions. And I suppose I'm really thinking here in particular of a social media campaign, perhaps even a television campaign highlighting the need for responsible and supportive behaviour by men and boys. And I've watched the Greater Manchester campaign that has been led by Andy Burnham, and I would suggest that we try to learn from this. It is obviously essential that the education departments in all of our schools are fully engaged and supportive of any campaign. So I would like to propose that the Executive Office considers this first action to be initiated in advance of any strategy and any documents, and if I could have the support of the committee, we would write to the Executive Office asking them to initiate a social media and television campaign to educate our young men and our boys on appropriate behaviours.
Yep.
Very much so, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And on that note, can I remind members of the online event that is scheduled to take place in the morning of Thursday the 24th of February to engage with stakeholder organisations on the proposed domestic and sexual abuse strategy and an equally safe strategy, and the strategy to tackle violence against women and girls. A draft list of invitees will be in next week's pack for agreement. Item number 2 under my chair's business is can I refer to members to the table pack in relation to Fair Employment School Teachers Bill. It was introduced on the 17th of January. This is to be referred to this committee. As primary legislation, it takes priority over all other business and will take up a significant amount of committee time. Therefore, can I ask if members would agree that we invite the bill sponsor to brief the committee at his earliest or at our earliest opportunity, perhaps even next week. Would you be happy with that?
I think so, Chair. If this is going to hit the floor before the end of the mandate, I don't know if that's possible, but given what the Speaker said yesterday in his letter, it has to get through committee scrutiny, and I'm not sure if it will. But I hope that it does. Is there any indication whether this will make it through in time?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't, but I think we can initiate.
Yeah, the sooner the better. I mean, I think the most that we can
initiate,
play our role,
yeah,
and there's space on
with,
the agenda.
and take it as far as possible within this mandate, and perhaps be taken up at a later time, because it is coming very late to us, and very late to us as a committee, you know, and for committee stage as well. So if we invite the bill sponsor, but also, you know, to help support the pathway and the process through, would members agree that we call for evidence in advance of the committee stage? So commence that process of calling for evidence.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It all has to be done to expedite it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That all has to be done to speed it up.
So it's just a sequencing of events, but we're just going a little bit before because of the time constraints. Thank you for that. Item number 3, I'm just giving you an update on this morning, the statement of principles for handling complaints. We laid the motion before and it was agreed in the Assembly floor this morning. So can I thank members for the contributions, John for supporting the proposals, and Pat Sheehan made a really positive and constructive contribution as well on the floor this morning. The Public Services Ombudsman will now adopt a statement of principles for the handling of complaints. Item number 4, as you're aware, we had a meeting yesterday with Victims and Survivors Forum and in the Long Gallery. If members, I know a few members here were in attendance of that. If you want to share your reflections, I'll kick off and share some of mine. Well, I felt it was a really positive engagement, and in a way it's kind of highlighted just how bereft we as legislators have been, that we haven't had that opportunity to really engage in some of the big issues that we're tackling at committee level with some of you know, the sectors and the victims and survivors forums. So it was really insightful. There was a lot of context put into the work that they've been doing and the services that are being provided, and I found it very, very useful. So if any other members would maybe want to indicate that.
Yes, Chair, I agree. I think it was a very worthwhile meeting. I enjoyed the ability to go around the tables and pick up on those different issues. I suppose if I could summarise some of the concerns maybe that the forum members had,
please.
Was in the absence of a commissioner, the fact that they have depleted in numbers from 25 to 12, and the pressure that's now putting on the forum members. They still do represent a wide and diverse range, but I think it's a lot of them are professionals, a lot of them have difficulties maybe doing Zoom as well, and I think the sooner that we see a commission in place and get those new members appointed, the better. But apart from that, I think it was really worthwhile to do it, and I think it's something that should be done more often up there, and we can engage more regularly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of the conversations that we took part in around the need for the way that you have an expert and an advocate on issues of race and like within each department. I think that they were calling for somebody to be their departmental sort of advocate, champion.
Yep.
In terms of victims' issues, and that probably makes sense, because if we are, you know, when you talk about gender proofing or race proofing any pieces of legislation to ensure that they're not going to have unforeseen negative impacts, that's maybe one of the groups within society that are often forgotten about, and you know, are there and across society and a range of backgrounds. So I think that would be worthwhile, and the education conversation as well. You know, I don't know within this department if there is an awful lot that we can do to feed into how we encourage that conversation, but it's not going to be just the Department of Education. It needs a broader look, and I suppose the impact that whole thing about, instead of pulling people out of the river, we need to go up the stream and see what's causing them to fall in the first place. And there's so many different aspects of life that have been impacted negatively by people that had a negative experience during the conflict, or, you know, a victim or survivor of any institution, and we need to think about that holistically. So
Absolutely, and they talked a lot about transgenerational, you know, impact as well. So there's a big piece of work there to do. Okay.
Oh,
Yes, Trevor.
yeah, I thought it was a worthwhile event, and a good format actually, because it wasn't, sometimes in those events you run round tables, there are too many people there. This one was good because there was the right representation and not too many of us, so it worked well. I was very struck by the two gentlemen who were talking about mental health and the need for a regional trauma centre. Just by coincidence, I have an oral question. I'm putting one in on that topic, because this thing was originally announced in a grand manner by Simon Hamilton in 2015. We were going to have a world leading centre for this. Nothing has happened. So that's not a first for this place, but it doesn't reflect very well on us. It wasn't even an announcement that they were making investigations about the feasibility of it. This was to be all singing, all dancing, set up quick as possible. Didn't happen.
Thank you, Trevor. Can I bring Alex Easton into the spotlight, please?
Yeah, it was just to mention that I thought it was very worthwhile, and I liked the format, and I was concerned talking about the lack of the regional trauma networks, which Trevor's just mentioned. So I've already put an oral question down that as well, but I was wondering, as a committee, can we write maybe to the First and Deputy First Minister's office about that, or is it the health, or both, to try and get an update? Because that's something like 8 years now nearly, and it's just crazy that it hasn't even got off the ground, if that's possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for that. Okay. Members, you'll remember that the committee wrote on the 7th of October to the First and Deputy First Minister asking for an update regarding the appointment of the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors, and for consideration of the appointment of departmental champions as well. The committee also wrote on the 12th of October to the Health Minister in relation to the establishment of a regional trauma centre. So obviously from yesterday's discussion we haven't made too much any progress in some of that. So I will seek your agreement. Can we write to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister for an update on that appointment and the appointment of departmental champions? And Emma, you're absolutely totally right. We have a very unique space here. While we have equality agendas in place, we don't have any victim impact, and we need to do that pretty quickly.
Chair, I'm afraid understanding Order 62 we're required to suspend if a member leaves the committee to vote.
To the public, we have a plenary going on today, and voting is taking place. If ever any member of the committee chooses to vote in person, we must suspend the committee. We will recommence as soon as voting takes place.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Good work.
Welcome back. I'll pick up where we left off. This could happen quite a lot this afternoon. So I'm seeking members' agreement, first of all, to write to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister for an update on the appointment of the Commissioner and the appointment of the departmental champions. Also, write to the Health Minister for an update on the establishment of Regional Trauma Centre that would be it. Is everybody happy enough with those? Okay, that's great. Item number 5 under Chairman's business. EU exit matters were referred to the committee in June 2020. Additional resource was provided to assist the scrutiny of this area, as matters arising from the EU exit still require a substantial amount of resources. Can I seek agreement of the committee to write to the clerk assistant to request that these resources are retained for the committee beyond the current mandate? You'll all be aware that we get regular briefings from Shauna regarding all EU matters, but that is an additional resource that has been given to this committee, but it's not exclusively for this committee as well, for she advises other committees outside of that. I myself find them absolutely invaluable, particularly in advance if we're getting briefings from any of the teams, UK or EU teams as well. In addition to that, Shauna will brief me every week, every Tuesday. She'll give me a briefing and an update of anything that has happened that in the previous week or any changes to any of the common frameworks or updates as such. Really, really important, and I think that we need to retain that expertise among the civil service staff. So are you happy for us to write to the clerk assistant in order that these resources are retained?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On that note, can I refer to correspondence from the European Affairs Subcommittee on the protocol to the Home Office that is contained on pages 126 to 128 of the meeting pack, and also to correspondence from the Human Rights Commission on pages 139 to 142 of the meeting pack. These items of correspondence raises issues in relation to the Nationality and Borders Bill, currently in the House of Lords. Clause 71 of the bill relates to the introduction of electronic travel authorisation, and the concerns raised in the correspondence are that this will place restrictions on travel north and south. I'm bringing this to Chair's business because I really believe that this is really important. We have to keep our eye on the ball here in relation to that bill that's gone through the House of Lords. We need to be very concerned about the government's proposals in relation to the electronic travel authorisation process, and that it could potentially mean for the border here on the island, I suppose as an MLA representing a border area. I'm very concerned about the impact for those workers who commute every single day to and fro from Derry. So I suggest that our committee, first of all, endorses the concerns that have been raised in those two correspondence in relation to the ETA and arrangements for the border. The correspondence from the Human Rights Commission was particularly in relation to the questions that the committee asked them as they were briefing us a few weeks back. So they put in a paper concentrating on that particular area. So I think if I had the committee's permission, I would suggest that we write to the Secretary of State indicating our concerns and seeking assurances that there will be no attempt to either regular or infrequent border controls to check people's identities in relation to the ETA, and that the ETA will not be used to remove frontier workers' permits. And I think it's really important for all the people that move about on a daily basis, just doing normal business on this island. I would also like to write to the Shadow Secretary of State to indicate that they keep a close eye on what's happening in relation to that and the impact that it has in particular to our unique position here on the island.
Yeah, absolutely.
Members happy? Item one extra bit of Chair's business. Sorry, this is the final bit. Members can refer to correspondence from the Assembly of the European Affairs Manager on pages 212 to 213 of the meeting pack, which lists the current stages of the common frameworks. Members, the committee has oversight role for the progress of the common frameworks, and in light of the need to ensure that the scrutiny of the frameworks can be achieved by the end of the mandate, can I seek your agreement to write to the relevant statutory committees for a view on the issues and impediments to the scrutiny of the frameworks? Are you happy for us to do that?
Chair, yes.
Time again is running away with us, and that's going to be another difficulty in relation to the scrutiny for the common frameworks. But if we have your agreement to seek that, it's very good. Thank you. So item number 3 is the draft minutes. The draft minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of January 2022 are on pages 6 to 13 of the meeting pack. If members are content, I will sign on your behalf.
Sorry, Chair, I was just trying to get the pages up for that last one. Could I just add a comment to the issue you were talking about, the common frameworks?
Yes,
That'd be okay?
of course.
Just noticed it says that the government and involved governments have agreed to aim to complete delivery to the common frameworks before March 22, ahead of the election. What are the implications, if any? I'm sure there might be some, if that doesn't happen, given the time pressures and constraints on Assembly business. Are there any, or could we find out?
We can find out. I think the areas of concern, I think, could be within the Department of Agriculture, Deborah. There is a significant
The majority of them,
amount,
yes.
that relates to their department. So there are challenges there, whether they can be completed within the time frame.
Because if you think then post-March you have the election period, then the time to get some assembly re-established, then summer recess if it does get re-established, which we hope it does. But, you know, it is imperative, I think, that most of those get done, but it would be interesting to hear the impact if they're not, if that could be done.
We can make that request
Okay,
from the
thank you.
department for an answer to that. Okay, item number 4, matters arising. I have one item under matters arising. Last week we brought up about the recruitment to the new board members for the Victims and Survivors Board. That advertisement is now live, and members, the advert and candidate information booklet are on pages 14 to 55 of the meeting pack. Okay, item number 5, Departmental Officials Truth Recovery Programme, oral briefing, and we're going to have to suspend while voting takes place. Apologies.
You're all right.
All right. Avoid some of the next ones.
No, don't worry.
Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Welcome back. Can I welcome to our committee meeting this afternoon a briefing from the departmental officials on the Truth Recovery Programme. Can I refer members to pages 56 to 118 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? And can I welcome to the committee Mr. Gareth Johnson, Director of Good Relations and Inclusion Directorate, the Executive Office, and also Mr. Colin Moffat, Truth Recovery Programme Director, the Executive Office. Can I advise you that the session is being recorded by Hansard and the video of the meeting will be available on the committee webpage. Can I invite members to make the brief?
Sorry, Chair, the sound was just breaking down a little bit at the end there. I'm going to ask Colin if he would address the committee since you heard from me last week. But I did just want to pause to acknowledge what you said about the murder of Aisling Murphy. Obviously, the specific proposals you're talking about, colleagues and ministers will want to give those consideration. That's not directly my area, but I did want to acknowledge from DEO the fact that it brings our work on ending violence against women and girls into very sharp focus. And also to note our condolences to Ms. Murphy's family and our shock at the events that have taken place just recently. But I'll pass over to Colin in terms of the specifics on the Truth Recovery Project.
Thanks, Gareth, and thanks, Chair. Can I check just before I start with my opening remarks if everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you very well, Colin.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, well, I would like to start by thanking the committee for giving us the opportunity to provide this briefing on the next steps of implementing the recommendations of the Truth Recovery Design Panel's recent report, which is one of the Executive Office priority policy areas for the coming period. I'd like to start though by saying that I'm very aware that calling this a priority policy area is quite a cold expression, especially when we reflect on the very human and very personal element to all of this. That is something that ministers fully recognise, and that is why it's a priority policy area for them. More importantly, though, delivery of this programme of work in full is a priority for victims and survivors themselves. I think this has been reflected to date in the attention that you as a committee have paid to this since the publication of the report in November. You'll know there's already been a number of pieces of correspondence on the matter, and the department's responses substantially make up the content of today's briefing. And I think that members received those responses earlier this morning. Today, I'd first like to provide an overview of the programme of work ahead, give some insight then on what the immediate priorities are, so those things which can and will be progressed within the current mandate before outlining what can only be taken forward in the next mandate. So as members will recall, on the 15th of November 2021, the Deputy First Minister made a statement to the Assembly on behalf of the Executive in which it was agreed that the recommendations of the Truth Recovery Design Panel's report would be implemented in full. This was a highly significant step for victims and survivors. For some, it has come after many, many years of campaigning, and I'm sure it was a day of both relief and also probably a bit of anxiety for some of those in terms of what's to come. The report itself came after, excuse me, a 6-month period where a 3-person design panel worked directly with victims and survivors to ascertain their needs for any forthcoming investigation. What the panel has recommended is a comprehensive package which goes beyond just an inquiry. The inquiry itself has understandably attracted quite a lot of media attention, But the full package proposed for implementation goes further than that. It includes redress, it includes memorialisation, support service, and among other things. In total, the report provides 5 overarching recommendations. These are recommendation 1, the adoption of guiding principles. So in short, how the work will be taken forward over the coming period. Recommendation 2 relates to the responsibilities of the Executive Office. 3 is the integrated truth investigation. Recommendation 4 is access to records. And recommendation 5 is redress, reparation and compensation. As I've said, considered together, these recommendations set out a comprehensive package to address the needs of victims and survivors, but it does come across as a relatively short list of 5 core recommendations, which probably doesn't tell the full story of the work we have ahead. The report itself is very comprehensive in its analysis and the detail of what sits behind those initial 5. We take there to be about 77 sub-recommendations which support those initial 5. Some of those 77 recommendations are relatively straightforward, while others will require significantly more work, some of which will require collaboration on a north-south and an east-west basis to implement in full. The intention is that all of the recommendations will be progressed as far as possible in parallel rather than in series. Even so, it's anticipated it will take sustained effort over a sustained period of time to implement all recommendations in full. Suffice to say, we do have a substantial programme of work ahead of us. As you'll understand, though, it is just not possible to progress some of what's required within the current mandate given the time available to us all, and that's something that the committee has already reflected on in terms of other issues already. We have, however, identified a range of immediate actions to be taken, though, within the current mandate, some of which the committee has already identified in correspondence over the past number of weeks as being of significant early importance. I'll go through these in turn now. So in respect of recommendation 2, responsibilities of the Executive Office, a distinct division has been established within TEO to lead on implementation of the work programme. Work is ongoing to resource the division appropriately, and a cross-departmental programme board is being established to oversee delivery of the report's wide range of recommendations. Recommendation 3 relates to the establishment of the integrated truth investigation, which is comprised of an independent panel which feeds into a full public inquiry. Work has commenced on establishing the independent panel by May 2022. Access to records is covered in recommendation 4. The Department of Health is currently progressing the Adoption and Children Bill through the Assembly, and work is ongoing on an amendment in respect to an aspect of this recommendation, specifically related to the preservation of records. The bill is currently at committee stage and is expected to reach the Assembly in February. And finally, as part of recommendation 5 on redress, a business case for interim support services for victims and survivors through the Victims and Survivor Service, that's BSS, has been approved by the department. So further to these updates, which are all specifically tied to those 5 core recommendations, we have some further updates to provide the committee this afternoon. So we have established a dedicated consultation forum with victims and survivors, which has already met on 3 occasions. That was on the 30th of November and 14th of December 2021, and most recently, just last Wednesday, the 12th of January. This will be a key mechanism going forward to ensure that victims and survivors are both kept up to date, but also to ensure that they have a prominent role in informing the development of the programme of work ahead. I've also engaged with a number of victims and survivors individually over the past number of months. Next, proposed budget allocations for the period of 2022 to 2025 have been included within the draft budget, which is currently out to consultation. Members will be aware that consultation is due to close on the 7th of March. And finally, early discussions have already taken place with HMRC regarding the benefits disregards that have been recommended as part of the comprehensive redress schemes. So further to this immediate progress, like I said before, we know there's a significant volume of work ahead, particularly in the next mandate, the most significant elements of which will require bespoke legislation and full consideration of the Assembly. In no particular order, two of these would be, firstly, the development of legislation related to the establishment of the full public inquiry. For reasons outlined within the Truth Recovery Design Panel's report, the inquiry can't be progressed through the Inquiries Act of 2005 and will require a more bespoke solution. The next piece of legislation will relate to a comprehensive redress scheme, which is likely to be comprised of two elements to satisfy the requirements of the panel's report. The first element would be a common experience payment, so open to anyone who's been through an institution. And the second element would be individually assessed to take account of an individual's own personal experiences. This doesn't mean, however, that the work will only commence during the next mandate on these bills. Instead, we intend to commence the necessary preparatory work as soon as possible within the current mandate, with a view to their introduction early in the next mandate. I hope you found the information I provided this afternoon helpful, and we're happy to take any questions from members on the issues raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Gareth, as well. Can I just ask, you've indicated about the process of establishing an expert panel, and you have indicated that you hope to do that within the 6-month period as designated earlier. You've indicated in the letter that we've received today that it is considered ambitious but achievable. Can you tell me what challenges that you may face that may not meet that 6-month deadline, and what progress have you made specifically in that area to date?
Thanks, Chair. So I can start on the progress we've made specifically to date and then move on to the challenges, if that's okay. So I think one of the things that the report is quite helpful in doing is that it sets out the 6 or 7 kind of key expert disciplines that are required on the independent panel. So there are things like the human rights expert, an expert in archiving, genealogy, etc. So what we have been doing so far is working on the rule specification for those and the application pack to make sure that we get the best candidates possible with relevant expertise to fill those. So that's what we've been doing to date, and we're hoping to carry that forward into an appointments process over the next few weeks. In terms of key challenges, I mean, there are some challenges in terms of whether you can attract the calibre of candidates that I think everyone is hoping for and anticipating in terms of the panel. Now, I have taken some assurance from the Truth Recovery Design panel on this, that they're comfortable the expertise is out there and that people will be attracted to work on like this, but that would be a key challenge. Other challenges around the time frame will be probably once we hit the pre-election period and ensuring that any ministerial appointments are able to be made in a timely fashion.
Thank you. And we wrote to the Department on the 29th of November asking that movement on the preservation of records should be swift. And also in your communication with us this morning, you have indicated and referred to that in relation to a bill that is underway at the moment. Have you taken any additional action in order to secure records over and above waiting for a bill to be passed?
We haven't taken any additional steps. Sorry, the sound is...
Sorry, Colin, it was maybe me coming in. I was just going to note that the Health Minister had written at the Truth Recovery stage to the relevant institutions and asking them to preserve records. So certainly the institutions have all been asked at as senior a level as they could be asked from. But obviously the concern of the Truth Recovery panel was that should be backed up by a legal requirement, and the amendment in the Adoption of Children Bill, the clause in the Adoption of Children Bill is designed to secure that and seem to be the best method of securing it in the current mandate.
I think Gareth has provided the answer in the opposite way I was going to, but the answer is the same. So I was going to say we haven't taken any additional action beyond the earlier steps.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. And you have indicated about bespoke legislation being required and in 2 specific areas. So in relation to a full public inquiry, but also in relation to a financial redress scheme. Obviously, you know, when we hear about legislation being required, we also hear very loudly that this is going to take a considerable amount of time. And one of the things that was pressed upon us, particularly by the authors of the report and by the mothers and babies, the briefing, was time is of the essence. And a lot of people that have gone through these institutions are, you know, in latter years. And I was wondering, is there anything else that can be done regarding that type of redress in absence of legislative process?
Garth, I'll start on this one, and if there's anything you'd like to bring in from previous experience of redress schemes. Chair, this is something that we have taken legal advice, and the Department of Health has taken legal advice on while the report was being drafted. There may be administrative ways that you could do redress earlier. The issue would be the benefits disregard piece. So essentially, to make sure that whatever individuals get as a common experience payment or through an individually assessed sum later wouldn't be having any benefits or welfare payments or whatever else being discounted from that sum. It would need a legislative intervention. Garth, I would imagine, will have experience of similar redress schemes and issues previously.
Yeah, and that point about benefits, as the committee will know, became a significant issue on historical institutional abuse. Very pleased to say that we have now addressed that issue with colleagues in departments across the water, and the relevant regulations have been made so that those payments are exempt from impact on benefits in Great Britain, but the committee will know that without the relevant legislation being in place at the start, that was quite a challenge and a substantial period of time. The other point about legislation and redress is that we need statutory authority to spend money on a particular issue. Now, for small amounts, you can go under the Budget Act, but you're limited there to £1.5 million a year for 2 years. And clearly, we anticipate that the redress payments rightly will be far in excess of that. So there are also reasons of propriety why you need legislation for redress. But what I would say in terms of the inquiry is that I think the panel's model, the Truth Recovery Design panel's model of having both a statutory public inquiry and a panel, which we've been talking about the recruitment for just now, is very helpful here. In that panel, which is non-statutory, can be got up and running relatively quickly. And there also will be provision in its terms of reference following on from the recommendations of the Truth Recovery Design panel for the evidence that panel gathers to feed through into the statutory inquiry. And the panel will also be able to do various things of its own volition, including commissioning research and further studies and inquiries. So in the meantime, there will be the work that the panel can do while the legislation for the inquiry is going through. In fact, if the panel is able to do as much as we hope it will be able to do, it'll be a very good preparation for the inquiry.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask John Stewart, Deputy Chair, to ask a question?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Gareth, Colin, thanks for your time, for your answers and for the submission that you made to the committee today. Just following on from a couple of the Chair's points, in terms of the planning to get to that legislative process in the Assembly, granted it won't happen in the current mandate, but is the work developed enough now, or will be developed enough by the time we hopefully come back in May or June to see it on the timetable very early so we can progress as quickly as possible?
Colin might want to say something about the practicalities, but yes, there is preparatory work underway, as Colin has said. I think it's helpful on both of these areas that we're not completely starting with a blank sheet of paper. In particular, setting up the public inquiry, we have the model that was used for historical institutional abuse, and while there has been commentary on that, and there are no doubt lessons we can learn for next time, there is at least there is a piece of legislation there that, to some extent, we can base our legislation on. So we're not starting with a completely blank sheet. There is experience across government on that. Likewise on redress, we've had the recent experience of setting up the HIA redress board, and have the lessons that we've learned from that. We've got the experience as well of setting up the victims payment scheme. So I think there is a head start that has already been made on this. I think the critical thing now is the work that Colin and his team will be continuing to do with the consultative forum, so that we can make sure that the detail of that legislation, the detail of how the inquiry will work, and the kinds of provision that the redress scheme are going to make, that we can make sure that we listen to the views that victims and survivors want to put forward on those in putting recommendations to ministers.
Excellent. Yeah, just on that point, obviously there was a lot of concerns among victims and survivors here, particularly following the announcement in the Irish Republic about their narrow and obtuse definition of what a victim and survivor was, and their entitlement through that process to redress. So hopefully we don't go anywhere near that, and that all victims and survivors' concerns around that are listened to, and I'm sure that will be the case, Gareth. In terms of truth recovery, the Chair referred to us writing on the 29th, and about the access to records. What concerns and what difficulties and what solutions have been found to cross-border access to records? Because a lot of this does cross into the Irish Republic, and the difficulties surrounding that. That's something victims have pointed out in the past whenever they've been trying to access records. Have you got concerns around that in terms of what legislative framework would be required, or what cooperation between the two areas?
Colin might want to say something more about this, because the cooperation that's needed is absolutely something that's been highlighted by victims and survivors. And in the letter that we've sent this morning with the action plan appended, you'll see a section that is specifically on this area, and notes the specific departments and contacts in the South that we intend to continue liaising with. Colleagues in the Department of Health have already had discussions with colleagues in the South. And Colin, you might want to say something more.
I think suffice to say that there has been quite a bit of contact, I think, between the Department of Health and colleagues in...
Colin, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. Trevor has had to leave the room. He's going to place his vote in the Assembly. And during that period, I have to suspend the committee meeting. Can we come back to it, hopefully, very shortly?
Yeah, okay.
30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Can I welcome everyone back to our committee meeting this afternoon? And Colin, if you could pick up where you left off in your response to the question from John.
Yeah, so I think I was just in the process of reiterating Garth's point that there had been engagement at earlier stages between Department of Health and officials south of the border in terms of that cross-border collaboration, and particularly where legislation might be required. I suppose there's probably a couple of other updates and a bit of insight to provide on some of this. So members will likely be aware that just last week the government in the south published the get the name of this right, Birth Information and Tracing Bill, which will be a substantial step change for individuals who have been adopted who are looking to receive or be able to access their records. I understand that for some it probably doesn't go far enough, but I think it's a good start. So at least there will be legislative provision there for people to access their records. John, I think your question though is more specifically about what concerns we have, because you're obviously aware, and the committee is aware, that a number of individual victims and survivors have had challenges in accessing their records. And it's it's a point obviously of frustration and I imagine despair, to be honest, for a lot of those. And that is one of the tasks that the independent panel, when established, is going to be considering in full. And to give a bit of insight on that, so I've spent some time talking to the Truth Recovery Design Panel members themselves to understand a little bit more about some of the roles of independent panel members. One of them that you'll see listed is an archivist. And while that looks like a pretty narrow definition of someone who's going to catalogue records, it actually goes a little bit beyond that. And the hope then is that's actually someone who can provide a bit more insight in terms of challenges with accessing records, especially where things like GDPR or subject access requests have been cited as barriers to stopping people getting information. So hopefully the independent panel will be able to provide a bit more insight on some of that, and not just insight, but also provide some pragmatic solutions to help people address some of those barriers they've been facing.
No, that's very useful and very helpful information, Colin. I'm sure to those victims who are watching, they'll be glad that the work is progressing on that to help them in that quest for information. That's all I have today, Chair. Just to thank you both again for coming along today and for giving us the answers to the questions.
Emma, you've indicated you want to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Colin and Gareth, for your briefing and for the questions that you've answered so far. I suppose the remarks that Gareth made at the outset are apt and appropriate, and it's been in the discourse of the public across the country since the murder of Aisling Murphy last week, and I think it's appropriate that we're having this conversation. And when we're discussing with you the mother and baby homes institutions and the impact that has had, and the redress that we're awarding to victims and survivors, and how we try to heal the hurts of the past, we have to take into account the fact that although a very different outworking, this was the result of the same misogyny and attitudes that were responsible for the killing of Aisling Murphy, and the outpouring of anger and hurt that we've seen in the past week, and show us that when these misogynistic values prevail within society, that's what we have as the result of that, and obviously much more common and unchallenged, and we're much more prevalent within society, when these institutions were operational. My question, I wanted to ask sort of what you had just answered around John's question about North-South cooperation, and obviously we have seen, I suppose, in the 26 counties, the process so far in terms of the mother and baby homes redress has been a lesson in what not to do and how to further traumatise victims and survivors and their families. And last week there was another string to that bow with the Minister's announcement around his Birth Information and Tracing Bill, and the fact that it ignored the recommendations of the Joint Oireachtas Committee, and the hurt that has caused, in particular for adoptees, and once again the feeling that they're not being listened to. So I am heartened to hear that in the North, the officials that are working with the Minister on the amendments to the Adoption and Children Bill are working with the officials in the 26 counties and taking some of that learning on board. And I do feel that it is it's important that I put on record that it's not acceptable that the minister isn't, the minister in the 26 counties isn't bringing his amendments to the health committee before progressing, and I think that's important that that's said, and victims hear that we are listening to them, and that, you know, what has been done in other jurisdictions is incorrect. I wanted to ask around work on the burial locations and whether or not that's going to be something that is likely to be progressed within this mandate, and if work has begun on that.
Colin might want to pick this up. It's something we've been discussing within the department just in the course of the week, and there is a specific recommendation in the Truth Recovery Design Panel report that this should be one of the responsibilities of the independent panel. So our intention is that the panel will be able to pick this up. Colin?
Yeah, so just on what Gareth has said, the Truth Recovery Design Panel report does include is a draft terms of reference for the panel and the types of activities they should be able to commission. One such thing would be the burial sites, so looking for unmarked graves and commissioning geophysical surveys. So that is something that will fall to the panel in time, Emma. The challenge that we see there may be with some of that is that when some of this land is privately owned, it may actually require statutory authority to intervene. And that is something that is again written into the draft terms of reference for the statutory inquiry when we get to that point.
Okay, so it's not, I suppose, it's not in process at the minute, but that challenge has been considered as something that will arise.
And there's definitely a plan for it between the panel and the statutory inquiry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate that. I suppose it's just the additional hurt that this causes, and the things like record recovery and the burial locations are outstanding issues that then further exacerbate the process for people that have come through these institutions. So thank you both. Thanks, Chair. That's me.
Okay. Can I bring Pádraig Delargy in question?
Yeah, I mean, Emma's covered a lot of what I was going to say, and very succinctly as well. The only real question that I have then is around recruitment, around representation, and around how the consultation forum was recruited. So are you satisfied that all victims and survivors are well represented within that?
Colin, go on ahead.
So I would have to say at the minute, in terms of how the forum was recruited initially, this is actually something we have inherited from the earlier work of the panel. They had, at an earlier stage, reached out and engaged directly with, I think, approximately 400 individuals and kept contact lists. And as the process went on, they had asked people if they still want to be kept informed, kept engaged with the consultation forum and with the process. A specific question was asked of people, would they like their details passed to the executive office to be part of the consultation forum? And everyone who did say yes to that at the point are engaged. Of the 3 meetings so far, we have had, I think, 40 odd people in the first, about 35 in the second, and last week was slightly lower than that. And I'd have to say that there is a broad range of experience there, and this is one of the things that I'm struck with, not so much from our engagements through the forum so far, but actually through some of the individual engagements that I've had. I think that while you could get a forum that's generally representative, so you may have, for example, birth mothers there, adoptees, people who have a cross-border aspect, people who are in the Magdalen laundries or the workhouses, individual experience isn't quite captured in terms of some of those broader categories. Everyone I have spoken to, while they might have a shared experience on paper of having been in one of those institutions, their personal piece is far different. I don't actually think that there are 2 people I've spoken to so far that there's too much read across. So the point of representation is something that's certainly being considered around the forum, and how we make sure that all those voices are heard, and that basically everyone has an opportunity to have their input as we go forward. One of the things we're looking to do is make sure that forum is as inclusive as possible, and people should be able to come along and get their updates and input to the process as we go through. There are also suggestions then to tighten it a little bit to aid some decision making, but that is still a conversation we're having with the forum.
Thanks very much, and I think that kind of highlights, I suppose, the complexities and the sensitivities of it. Just one other point was just around the Victim Survivor Survey business case, just around how that's progressing at the minute.
So that's a relatively easy one to answer. The business case that we received from the Victims and Survivor Service has been approved, and the VSS are currently working on operationalising the additional services that were in the business case.
Thanks.
Okay, can I bring Trevor Lunnan?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, gentlemen, for your presentation. I'm sorry I've had to pop out a couple of times and disrupt proceedings, but I'll try not to do it for a while now. My question really been answered, but just in terms of what happens around the end of the mandate and the beginning of the next one, and I think I gathered in response to what John asked you that this process can straddle that period of about 7 or 8 weeks easily, and it shouldn't be disrupted by it. Is there anything that needs to be dealt with specifically before the end of the mandate that would otherwise cause disruption? And also, I wonder what happens, because there's no guarantee that this place will get up and running again immediately. It's been known to take quite a while. So would that have an effect if it was a long term, if the Assembly wasn't sitting for a long time?
The one thing that we're dependent on the Assembly for in this mandate is the clause on records preservation. So that's the particular thing that's going through will be going through the Assembly just at the moment. In terms of any gap that there might be, and I obviously can't speak to the politics and to the technicalities of that, but we are helpfully in a position where the executive has agreed the main recommendations. And that means that all the work that Colin has set out has been continuing and will continue. So, for example, the work to establish the appropriate support services for victims and survivors. The work on setting up the panel and all the administrative arrangements around that. The work on starting to put together what the legislation will look like, and starting to work with the drafts people to get those bills in order. All of that can happen in the meantime. Depending on what happens around the election, we will have to respond accordingly. But it always helps when you have the executive's agreement in your pocket, because that gives us as officials the authority to go ahead and to get on with work and to spend money as appropriate. And then we'll be in a position with the new Assembly to pick up the legislation on an inquiry and on redress.
Okay, well, that's very reassuring. Thanks very much. I wish you all the best with this.
Thank you very much. And just before you go, obviously you, in order to express all the priorities that you have stated in your communication, you need appropriate infrastructure within your department. You need the appropriate resources, particularly staff and resources. Are you content that you have that in place at the moment, Gareth?
Well, I'm certainly content that we're making progress, but I'm sure when you ask Colin, he would say that more resources would be very welcome. Where we will be in the course of February is that alongside Colin, we should have 3 people engaged at grade 7 at principal officer level, 5 at deputy principal, certainly 1 at staff officer, and hopefully 1 or 2 more. And there's a shared personal secretary as well. Now, we continue to develop on that, and we will continue to expand that as the programme rolls out further. But I hope it does at least demonstrate that we've been taking the responsibilities seriously there, and we have been putting some resource and some key resource where our mouth is, as it were. I would just, though, Chair, want to acknowledge what Colin has been doing while we've been getting that additional support in place. When Colin started, he was the singular member of the Truth Recovery Division, and I think the progress that you've been hearing about has been very much down to his role and leadership. But we're taking seriously the need to provide additional support.
And Gareth, I'm very pleased actually at the progress to date. I'm very impressed. But one of the areas I just want you to clarify as well, in some of the documentation, it relates to Colin's position, and it says acting director of the Truth and Recovery Programme. And I'm just wondering, has that now changed? Because one of the areas that I believe is really important, that we have continuity of personnel within the department that are dealing with these recommendations. And I think that that's very important for the engagement with the victims and survivors as well. So I just want you to clarify that acting position as well.
Well, I'm sure Colin will welcome your support on that, but I do have to work within the strictures of the merit principle and proper recruitment arrangements for the civil service. Having that acting arrangement was the quickest way that I was able to fill that post within a couple of weeks of the Executive Office taking responsibility for this area. So that seemed the sensible way to do it. We will have a recruitment exercise likely for a number of posts at grade 5 director level within the Executive Office that is quite far advanced in preparations, and that panel has been meeting, and the longer term would be able to draw off that list. So we do need to follow proper processes, but we will certainly take steps to regularise the position.
Thank you very much.
I thought I was about to get a substantive promotion on air there.
You've got a bit of an endorsement, to be fair. Thank you very much, Gareth and Colin. That was a very informative briefing. There is one area that I just, from a committee's perspective, we as a committee want to be informed of progress along the way. That doesn't necessarily mean, oral briefings at committee level. But if a paper could be submitted through the committee just to update us on progress as and when it happens, I shudder when I hear things in retrospect that, that we're caught off the hop and we don't realise things have progressed or things that are not happening. So can we have regular written updates to the committee, please?
Yeah, we're happy to keep the committee informed, absolutely, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you all, and good luck, Colin, in your new role. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, do members want to advise on any recommendations they would like to update on that, or are you happy with the briefing as received?
I think happy with the update, Chair, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm quite happy with the progress that it's made to date, and there's a very clear priority setting there, which has to give us all a bit of comfort.
Yeah.
Okay, item number 6 is the forward work programme. Can I refer to pages 1 202124 of the meeting pack regarding the forward work programme. As mentioned earlier, the Minister of State, Heaton Harris, wasn't able to attend today to discuss current workings on the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland. Possible dates in March are being looked at with the Foreign Secretary to attend the committee before the end of the current mandate. If members are content with the remainder of the forward work programme, obviously we'll have additionalities in there now that we have recommended that that we progress with the bill, the Fair Employment Bill. That'll be scheduled in next week, and we'll see more about that. Okay, correspondence, item number 7. The correspondence, there was 11 items of correspondence from pages 125 to 55 in the meeting pack. 7.1 was the House of Lords European Affairs Subcommittee, and I discussed that under Chair's business. 7.2 was the joint statement of the Vice President and the UK Foreign Secretary, and again we just note that. 7.3, the protocol in Ireland, Northern Ireland talks with the European Commission. Again, on the 13th of January, we note that. 7.4, First Minister and Deputy First Minister response to civic engagement and the EU. Again, just a list of engagements that have already taken place. We can note that. 7.1, the Executive Office call for views on the new strategies to end abuse and violence. And again, 7.6 and 7.5 and 7.6 we discussed under Chair's business. In relation to 7.6, can I remind members that we will hear from the department officials in relation to the strategy at the next week's meeting and stakeholder event to be held on a Thursday morning next month, as stated. 7.7, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission information following on from the Executive Evidence session on the 15th of December. Again, I discussed that in Chair's business. 7.8, Mays Long Kesh Development Corporation Annual Report. Can I remind members that we will hear from the Strategic Investment Board in relation to Mays Long Kesh Development Corporation at a meeting on the 5th of February. 7.9, NIA EU Affairs Manager. Again, it's the update on the Common Framework, and we discussed this on Chair's business. 7.10, memo on the review of intergovernment relations is in business. We can just note that. And final is 7.11, the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce quarterly economic survey summary. I think just to kind of mention here, it is reassuring the quarterly report from the Chamber of Commerce that there are positive signs in relation to recoveries. Over 70% of the businesses that have responded to the survey said that they're expecting growth this year. But I would actually have one caveat there. Inflation is rising, and that's really significant, particularly when we're looking at the cost of living impact that it's going to have on our citizens, and I'm really concerned about that because it always impacts those in lower income families. So it's also another piece of positive data from the South Central Statistics Office, which showed £1.4 billion increase in sales from the north to south in the first 11 months of last year. So there are some positive signs there. But again, caveat, inflation is at its highest rate at 5.4%, and it's never been that for the past 30 years. So that will have an impact on the poorest people in our society. So anybody want to raise anything in relation to any of those items of correspondence that we haven't covered?
Sure.
Yep.
So final number 8, item number 8, any other business. I have one item of any other business. Rumour has it, and I don't like talking about rumours, but apparently there is plans afoot for an apology for those involved in the Historical Institute of Abuse, and it appears it could be scheduled for the 11th of March. Can we write to the Executive Office and have that confirmed? Okay. No other business? So the date and time and place of the next meeting is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 26th of January at 2 p.m. here in room 30. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.